Hi, John. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good. I'm a little, uh, I don't know. I'm very honored to talk to you. Hedwig came out.
Oh,
Um,
when you were a child.
no, I'm a lot older than I look, but I was like, what came out in 2001, so I was a junior in high school. So, um,
You
Hedwig,
were a child.
it came out like right when there was that amazing rush of like queer sort of entertainment in sort of a mainstream sort of platform. So it was sort of a
Right. And they tended to be a little rougher and readier and
Mhm.
less glossy and Hollywood. The price of acceptance is, of course,
Yeah, no, I think I would
queer
agree.
films are just like the straight films.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I was so surprised by how emotional Joe versus Carol is. I love shows that sort of really fuck with tone and are they could be really absurd one minute and then also very sort of sad and emotional the next minute, and that was not something that I expected from the show. um I was curious, for you personally, what it's sort of like to sort of play in that playground, just because, as I'm sure everyone on the creative team was aware or was thinking of, everyone knows this story because it's so fresh in our minds. And I feel like this limited series sort of really subverts our expectations almost.
I know, and it's unfortunate that there was a little Joe overload, and
Hmm.
I think not as many people I know rushed to see it because they'd had a lot of Joe. But what Aton really did was find that interesting balance that I like to work in. Hedwig, Short Bus, How to Talk to Girls tend to be more in that, like we're getting quite zany and camp
Yeah.
even, but which is not to, but if you play it right, as more realistically, instead of, think of it as a, Beavis and Butthead or something, you can, if the character in their absurdities are wanting what they want, but it's just what they want is crazy and what they look like is crazy and their goals are crazy. They still want what they want that is human. And then suddenly it can, just like in real life, when you meet, a crazy Southern dangerous shut-in, and suddenly they make you cry. It's like they're real. Hedwig is real person. It's just the situation and the facts of her life are crazy.
Yeah.
And the filmmaking is underlining the crazy and then also honoring the emotional underpinning. So it was easy for me to go
Mm.
there because it was already, that's what I do. And that's the structure they worked with, and Aton worked on Shameless, which
Yeah.
also has that little feeling.
Yeah.
And he's a real mensch. And he also was very kind enough to take my input throughout, and crafting dialogue, cutting dialogue, even ideas about blocking. And in some ways, for example, the big speech I give in the jury in the court, he kind of let me go, and think of it as a Broadway piece. So I kind of helped craft that with the director and, in terms of dialogue and even jumping up and doing all the stuff that I do.
Yeah.
So it was a really perfect collaboration. I find that being older and clearer about what I like, I go into let's say Hollywood jobs with more of a point of view. And I'm like,
Hmm.
I want to be here. Sometimes they're money jobs too, but
Hmm.
this one turned out to be a money job that was really fun.
Yeah.
And what can I bring to it? And they're generally, like when I got pulled back into acting after a big respite by Lena Dunham in Girls, I was nervous, and my reaction to being nervous is to rewrite.
Hmm.
And she was very easygoing about that, and I'd give her stuff that I'd done, and she's like, I love 3/4 of this. I think we should keep the original for that. And we could talk in a rational way where it wasn't about ego.
Yeah.
And I so I go for I step into acting roles on TV lately with an opinion about the script. And not
Yeah.
everybody wants to hear that. But I'm a collaborator, so I just want to make it better. It's not to
Yeah.
make it more comfortable for me, but if if I'm in an environment where it is as good as it can be, it is comfortable,
Yeah.
so it's a kind of, I like to step in, and my actors, I want them to do that for me. So sometimes in TV, they're a little shocked that I have so many opinions. But if they veto it, great. That's their job. That's their
Yeah.
show.
I think that's what's exciting for me personally as a viewer to see you on screen in something, is that I actually can tell, obviously because I'm such a fan of all of your directorial efforts, everything that you've done. It's sort of like I can tell that you are a collaborative person. So I think that is actually very sort of, in a way, comforting as a viewer, and it's also very exciting because I know you as a performer are willing to try stuff and you're willing to throw back at other performers like as the character. So I think that for me personally is what I really like, and that's why I was so excited that you were in this role, just because it's a larger than life part. And I could tell that could have input in this and it would be receptive from the creative team.
I just wish I'd been able to do more with Kate.
Oh, that's so. I was finishing the show. I had like one episode left for the longest time, and I watched it yesterday with my husband, and he made the comment. He was like, they haven't been like on screen together, and I was like, that's what I think is sort of so crazy about this story too, is I think forget how separated these two people were, and like quite literally where they are in the United States is sort of kind of crazy that this fight was so huge and they weren't ever like near each other.
They were just in the courtroom, and
Yeah.
we have that one dream sequence,
Mhm.
which is funny because we were trying to improvise all the time, and
Mhm.
we started making out during that when we shot it spontaneously, and then they cut it. But I like that image because in another world they'd be best friends. They care about the tigers. They just had a different point of view, and they were abused by different types of people, and they suddenly saw a version of that abuser in each other. That
Yeah.
they mistook each other for enemies when they could have really worked together. Yes, he was more of a showman, and she was more of a, saw herself as a rescue person. But
Mhm.
and they could disagree about certain things, but I
Yeah.
don't know. It was a missed opportunity for
Well,
both
sort
of
of,
them.
yeah, like end of the day, I think that the end goal or the end game that these two people have is they
Was
care
the
about
same.
people. Yeah.
Yeah. And they
Um,
destroyed each other through their feud. You
yeah,
know,
that's what makes it so like tragic in a way. It was like they agree on the fundamental thing. It's just their points
the
of view are
tactics.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm always really obsessed with how actors physically embody someone, not necessarily a real person. I'm just always really obsessed with physicality and how I'm also obsessed with costuming. I was curious what it was like when you had all that gear on, how it sort of made you feel physically different. How did you sort of feel that it was not like an armor, but I guess how did you think it sort of like changed the way you moved yourself? Just because everything about Joe Exotic is so different than John Cameron Mitchell.
Well, it was, the audition, and I hadn't auditioned in 25 years. One advantage of being around a while is that most people can kind of go, oh yeah, John. And then I would get offered some things. And the acting oddly has been my living expenses while I work on my less lucrative other things,
Mhm.
writing wise and music wise. Um, so I'm forever grateful for, the streaming moment. But there was with this one, I realized I needed to audition because it was a very different thing. And, audition for myself to see if I could do it, and for them to see if I could do it.
Yeah.
And I'm a bit of, I moved around a lot as a kid. So the idea of doing someone else, not imitating them. I didn't want to do an impersonation of Joe, but like getting him in my bones was something I always enjoyed. But I only had 4 days to get ready. And
4 days.
it, yeah. And another
Oh my God.
for the audition, and then 4 days later I was cast. So
Mhm.
after that I had a month to,
All
but I
right.
realized I didn't, yeah, I realized I didn't want to go too far into the impersonation. So I kind of said to Aton, what if I'm like 60% Joe and 40% my imagination of what he might be off camera,
Mhm.
and more not doing every twitch and tweak, tweaker move.
Yeah.
And he was like, that sounds good. And Kate did the same. She's not the same age as Carole, but we got at a certain essence of them, that was fine. And the stuff we could imagine, what is Joe like alone with his husband?
Mhm.
He's probably not fronting the way he does everywhere else. So finding the tender side, and yes, he had a lot of husbands, and he was a bit of a harem master,
Mhm.
and he saw himself as a kind of savior, to these drifter kids.
Mhm.
And in some ways, he did put them on a certain course, but they outgrew him because
Yeah.
you could also see that he needed to control them and have control over his whole zoo of animals and people. He's a collector
Yeah.
of people. He cares about them, but he has to be in control. And that is his
Mhm.
flaw. He
Mhm.
is Anna Madrigal and, Tales of the City,
Yeah.
but on meth. He had to, he's
Mhm.
got paranoid and had to control all of his babies, and find enemies, uh, that weren't necessarily enemies before, and then make alliances with these horrible straight guy bullies who he thinks are going to save him, and of course, turn on him as well. So he's he made his bed, and there's a lot of boys in it. And
Yeah.
he has to lie in it, but and sometimes it's great. Even John, like in the series, said, I don't regret it. I really loved him.
Mhm.
And Travis, I think, did too. And that was the even biggest tragedy is Travis,
Mhm.
his first husband, very sad with dying of AIDS. And he was perhaps the most together of them, even
Yeah.
though he apparently had a meth problem
Mhm.
too, but he was more the caretaker. And then Dylan just seemed to be a kind of freeloader at the end. But
Yeah.
and there's someone else in jail now. You can't keep track. I do admire his keeping on thing. It might be due to narcissism and borderline personality,
Mhm.
but he's not going to buckle under, which makes him an American folk hero. It's
Yeah.
like it's weird that a gay guy became a kind of populist, rural standard bearer of freedom.
Yeah, there was I don't know what moment it was. It might have been the wedding. Maybe I can't remember which wedding it was. I think it was the
The
one
two
with
boys.
I think it was that one where I was looking at all of the gentlemen that were in, just even in the background. It's sort of,
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. There's something about it that sort of shocked me in a weird way. It's like all these like gruff, hulking
Yeah.
dudes are at this gay wedding that I sort of
Yeah.
like, I never in a million years would think that we would ever sort of see that. It was sort of like this weird thruple wedding was almost like revolutionary in this small sort of
Right.
thing.
And obviously those are the more, let's say, I mean, there's libertarian, then there's libertarian. But if you take it down to its base, it's pure freedom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Without hurting somebody.
Yeah.
And which is why I always found queer rights to be a weird thing for the right wing to proscribe,
Yeah.
to restrict. Of course, the religious thing is what does it. But these people are, you can see they probably were brought up Christian and the idea of marriage is important. But, when you meet the Trumpies, the real ones, they're not really Christian. They're just using that standard. They're just, they're just crazies, who use freedom as a kind of totem. And
Yeah.
sometimes they really mean it, as Joe did. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they just use it to get power, like Steve Bannon or whatever. But at its heart is something we can all relate to, I think, as Americans, is a sense of the idea of America as a place where you can make yourself, find yourself, and invent your own community. That started out with people from coming to, from Europe and, destroying the indigenous people. But even the indigenous people found their own wonderful ways in America. I mean, some of them were not wonderful. The Apache killed everybody in sight, but the Iroquois created a form of government that was very democratic, and the Puritans, yes, they were the religious fanatics, but they came for their own weird freedom. Conquistador it came for freedom and for money. It was a nation invented by religious cultists and brutal entrepreneurs. And in that, freedom was it, and still is, the rallying cry. And you can use it to oppress people, and you can use it in a very healthy way. I go sometimes to Short Mountain, which is the radical ferry commune in the most conservative part of Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
And just above the ferry, the queer hippie gatherings, is a youth Christian camp. And the sheriff comes to both places to get votes. And ferries help with the county commission. And it's a weird kind of, you're in your holler, I'm in mine. We're not necessarily going to be hanging out, but we respect each other's autonomy.
Yeah.
And that is the kind of rural America that I can relate to, and I grew up in some of those places. And yes, it's macho and it's misogynist and it's homophobic, but you make a direct connection with your neighbor there. All right, live and let live. I never thought I'd be friends with a guy in a dress, but you've taught me a few things, as friends of the family have said to me,
Yeah.
and they're good people. They just have been led down a certain path of conformism. And people like Joe, what I admire about him is that he broke that up,
Yeah.
but still held on to the rural, for better or worse, the rural values of community. And some of his videos are
Yeah.
very touching. He really tried to help a lot of people.
I think it was when I think there's a flashback in the episode where the tragedy with Travis happens, and I think it's when Travis is sitting at the gas station and Joe comes out and just without saying anything to him, he says something about like, hey,
work
for some work. Yeah. I don't know, that seeing it the second time in the series really sort of struck me how he just wanted to help people, and whether that got a little messy down the line, that's that. But I mean, I feel like
he was the cute one, but he probably did it to whoever, the toothless guy out of jail, the meth head girl named Crystal. Why do you think she's named Crystal? And I'm like, oh, I thought of that.
Yeah.
And he really, yes, he could get better work out of them and get lower wages, but he also had like I do when I'm with my theater and queer friends and drag friends. It's like we created a chosen family, and that, Joe did the same. And I really relate to that part of him. I think the meth and the megalomania and too much power drove him crazy.
Yeah.
His earlier abuse, he kept looking for more people that were going to hurt him, and that paranoia destroyed him.
Yeah.
And I don't condone his behavior, but I also kind of liked him.
Yeah, there was I kept thinking about, what's that Mean Girls meme? It was like, why are you so obsessed with me? Like, someone could say something about like, oh, this happened, and like it was Carole. And then I sort of realized like that paranoia is like one level of paranoia, but it also, there's a really sad paranoia for Joe that, the men in his life are going to leave him, or like he does.
Everyone leaves him.
Yeah, there's the sadness of he doesn't deserve love necessarily. Like, I think the stuff with his first husband, I think it's so interesting to see how he's, I don't want to say submissive, but there's like sort of a he allows his first husband to sort of like dote on him more,
be his daddy, to take care of him.
Yeah, obviously, because maybe because he's younger, but I don't know, there's that death that he had to deal with at such a young age, when people, everyone around him's telling me that gay people are awful, had to like really mess him up. I just thought
Oh
that
yeah.
was sad.
Yeah. And we're the same age. We lost a lot of the same people,
Hmm.
or lost a lot of people because we're that age. And his, I lost a boyfriend, not to AIDS, but to addiction. And so I could really relate to him. And his, instead of crumbling, he was just, he built himself up to never be hurt again. And in one way, it's admirable, and in another way, he created a monster.
Hmm.
So it's always a balance. Threading that needle of independence without becoming an impermeable narcissist is a hard one.
Yeah. Okay. I think in the episode where Travis passes, he refers to himself as a lost boy. Um, would you consider Joe to be Peter Pan?
He is. He created. I mean, he was in charge of Neverland, and
Hmm.
he even had alligators from Michael Jackson's Neverland compound that he bought for his boyfriend John. And when the fire hits that building, those alligators died. So yes, he is Peter Panish, and there's attendant beauty in that, but it's a very sad story of Peter Pan. When people forget that at the end of the book, Peter Pan comes back to see Wendy when she's grown up.
Hmm.
He sees her and he just cries. You she comforts him because
I just got chills.
and
That's
this
really, yeah, that's really sad.
yeah, the sadness that he can't grow up is different from what we
Hmm.
think of as like, I'm not going to grow up, I'm going to be happy forever.
Hmm.
And Joe in some ways didn't grow up. I mean, he toughened up.
Yeah.
He even changed his accent. He even had a lisp uh in the old days. I found one video of him as a young man with a lisp. He was much more gentle, and kind
Oh
of
yeah.
feminine, and I tried to capture that for his scenes in the 80s.
Mm.
But then after his boyfriend dies, you can see he starts creating the armor of the drag of Joe Exotic, starting with doing the magic shows. Um,
Mm.
and that's what happened. He had the zoo when his husband died, but he became the showman afterwards.
Mm. There's sort of a, I think that we see the first time that Joe adopts his name and he steps out on stage. I thought that was there's a really lovely quality of being that you bring, that he's like sort of almost scared to be in front of that many people um on stage.
But like,
uh,
but alive
yeah.
and accepted, and the same being a politician.
Mm.
When you see his videos of political debates and stuff, he's very good.
Oh yeah.
He's got it all together. I mean, it's still crazy, but people respond. He's like, people like me because I'm exactly who I say I am. I mean, it's not exactly who he says he is, but
Hmm.
and he does butch it up and country it up for those audiences. Um, but he's very attractive. I would have maybe voted for him if I was, living there, because he had that, I don't care whether you're a pothead or a meth head, I will
Hmm.
fight for you. Um, and it's like, God, who is this guy? If Jesse Ventura became governor of Minnesota and, you know, Trump won, I mean, why couldn't he, He's
Yeah.
more he's more reasonable than Trump. He believed in single payer health care.
Hmm.
He was kind of a social liberal in some ways, and libertarian in other ways. I don't know, but
Yeah.
this is not possible anymore. So I was happy to play him. I had a great experience. I bought a house for the first time. Didn't
Yeah.
expect to be able to do that, at this late date, approaching 60. And it's in New Orleans. I'm very happy for that. So Joe is allowed me to kind of think about the next part of my life. Feel a little guilty that but I also try to honor him. It's like as a
Mhm.
human, a complex human, not a cartoon, not a
Yeah,
villain.
I don't think you can go into sort of any real person portrayal, especially somebody like Joe, and have that mindset and think he's a horrible person. He did all these horrible things. Like, yeah, like we see some of the bad stuff that he did and how messy stuff got. But I mean, I don't think you can go into a role like that with that sort of mentality to vilify him that much and do as successful as you did, because I feel like you really tap into something very human and very private that I don't think that we've seen before. Like the scenes with him and his first husband, I just thought those are really lovely, and they're very
Yeah,
gave
they're
me, yeah, they're just,
they're
yeah.
weirdly complex,
Hmm.
and they, obviously things go wrong,
Yeah.
but and yes, he's enjoys chasing these boys,
Mhm.
but at the same time, he really is like a little kid with them. He wants the more the merrier. It's like as you
Yeah.
see when they all get married, and sometimes it's for show, as we
Mhm.
could see, but he also cares about them deeply and tattoos them all over him, and then
Yeah.
everything turns bad again. But in his view, there's always another possibility of love, and
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, John, for your time and your generosity. I I'm just big fan. I've been trying to hunt
Oh,
a copy of Short Bus for the last like 10 years. I feel like, because you can't find it anywhere.
well,
So
it's just been re-released, and
yeah,
the
I couldn't get into. There was a showing at this little art house theater near where I just moved to during the pandemic.
uh,
I think it sold out, and I couldn't get a ticket to it. So,
oh,
so
well, you can rent it like iTunes and Google
okay,
Play.
I need to rewatch it because it's been so long. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm proud of it.
thank you so much for bringing such a humanity to this character. I think the show is really underrated. So, thank you so much
Me
for,
too.
yeah,
Yeah, thanks so much, Joy. I
yeah,
appreciate it.
yeah. Have a
Have
good